Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's District Administration Web Seminar entitled Expert Insights, Creating a Safe, Inclusive School Community, brought to you by the generous support of our sponsor, Navigate 360. Before we get underway, I'd like to share a few housekeeping items. For technical support, please use the chat panel, which you can find on the right side of your screen. Select on my name, Stephen Blackburn, and then type your message if you're having any technical issues. If you don't have computer speakers, or if you prefer to listen privately, please dial the phone number and access code that I will be posting in the chat window in a few moments. We will also be welcoming any questions you have today with a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. To submit a question, please use the Q&A panel at the bottom right side of your screen and send your questions to all panelists, which is going to be your default option. If you don't see the chat or the Q&A panels for whatever reason, please look to the right of your screen and click the expand triangle, which is directly in front of the panel name, to make sure you have access to it. Also, something important to note, if you would like to access the web seminar at a later time, everyone who registered and is attending today will receive an email with a link to the slide and an archive recording. And with that, it is my definite pleasure to introduce you all to one of our panelists today, Matt Mastrione, who is the VP of Product Development at Navigate 360. Hi, Matt. How's it going? Thanks for being here.
Good afternoon, and thanks, Stephen. I appreciate being able to be here and get to talk about this today. As we think about Navigate 360, the company that I'm with, our company has been all about holistic safety. How can we think about, the core pillars of prevent, prepare, respond, and recover, and what can be provided each one of those points? No school district can take any one thing. You've got to think about all the things as a complete process and all the different pieces that come into play. Navigate 360 has been about this holistic view of safety, from emergency management, things like drills and safety plans, to alarms and accountability, behavioral threat assessment, understanding students before they're on a pathway towards violence, to health screening, which is common now kind of with the COVID era, e-learning, what topics can we do to engage from an education standpoint, and then, for us, a new piece of our technology is our on tip lines. How are we understanding information coming from our community? And all of that delivered through technology, education, and services, understanding all the different pieces that we can bring value to school districts. A little bit about me. I'm, as mentioned, into engineering. I have a software engineering background. They don't normally let people like me talk to people because we're not always the best at communication. But I do enjoy and get passionate about how technology applies and how schools can see things, not just the how, but the whys. Why are we doing things, and how does technology play a key role and continues to play a key role inside schools? I'm happy today to have a guest with me, Dan Trepainer. Dan is the former vice president at Raptor Technologies, a strong player in visitor management, a name many of you have heard. And he's currently vice president at Remind, again, of another very popular communication tool for schools. And I've been working with Dan for a couple of years now, just as a consultant collaborator. I love picking his brain and talking with him about what they're seeing in the industry and how can we think about how customers can use technology. So I appreciate you being here with us today, Dan.
Thanks for having me, Matt. I look forward to the discussion.
So maybe give us a quick view on some of your background, if you could expand a bit, just so people kind of understand your role.
Sure. So the last few years, since 2017, as you mentioned, I've been vice president at Remind, which is a two-way communication and learning platform focused on K-12 and higher ed, used to enable two-way communication between students, parents, and teachers, and now administrators. And before that, I spent about 4.5 years at Raptor Technologies, which focused on the visitor and volunteer management side of the safety space in K-12.
Well, thanks again for being here. The goal today is really to be discussion. So, there'll be some back and forth. I've got some topics and some questions and things, but really just want to talk through kind of, from a visitor management standpoint, but just some technologies and things around it. So I'll kind of dive into our first topic as we think about visitor management. Anything in a school shouldn't be kind of standalone. We want to think of things as being integrated and tied together. A smart visitor management solution should really add value. What are things that schools should think about as they think about what should this connect to? Like, what should I be looking at?
One of the points that was constantly made when I was at Raptor was, okay, what other things are we looking to integrate into? And I was big on flexibility even before my K-12 days, big on flexibility with technology in general. I grew up in the monolithic age of computers, and that's gone, right? And we need things, different schools and districts have different needs, and they need to be integrated for the ease of use. And also it becomes a more powerful platform if you're doing that for the administrators within those districts. So to your question, when you think about visitor management, like you mentioned, it's just a piece of the puzzle. I mean, it starts outside of the classroom. Really security starts in car line if you think about it. I've got a 7-year-old son that safety first the minute you pull onto that campus, right? And administrators have to be thinking from the time a person or a car or a vehicle of some kind pull into that campus, security starts, right? They're now responsible for that child. And also the teachers and the other administrators there. So then you think about door locks, you think about cameras, you think about visitor management, you think about computer systems that touch the classroom that go home with the children, that are our district and or school responsibility. How do you integrate all these things? How do you keep them safe from every aspect? And it really is a very broad, question, Matt, that really a district needs to sit down and think through. What are the kids accessing on the internet? What are the teachers accessing to teach them? And all the liability that could come with that. And also, how do we enhance that and make it a part of the community, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think even as schools think about from policy standpoint, as there's so many things, as you mentioned, across safety, like how are we thinking about creating safety plans and building that all the way from beginning to end of a school day and finding opportunities to make that, again, holistic connection, not just from a technology, but also be thinking about how does that apply to what policies that have been put in place on things like badging and are people following those types of rules.
Exactly. And the integration side of it needs to be flexible because every school and every district has a different need, right? And so when you come to a school and say, this is the way it works, well, then they've got to put a piece of the puzzle in that maybe doesn't fit. But yet they need that specific area of safety or security. And so, to your original question, they do need to be integrated and they do need to have the flexibility to work with other technologies.
What would be of value to a district to have that integration? I mean, there's a lot of little solutions out there, and a lot of people have grabbed and implemented certain things. What's the value of pulling that together?
I mean, the very first thing that comes to mind is ease of use. Administrators are pulled in 900 directions. I mean, think about when school starts, all the chaos that takes place within the buildings and the schools and the districts. To go chasing data is not their friend, yet they need it, right? So having an ability to pull all that data together, have the ability to analyze what's going on without going to 17 different screens or pulling that information through farming the data, which happens quite a bit. I mean, these are all things that make it more powerful, easier to use if you can integrate those technologies and then be able to pull against the information that's there. You make everyone's life easier.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. You mentioned kind of data in that. Is there concerns over data and how data plays a role in all this? If you've got data in a lot of places versus kind of data in one central spot, should we be thinking about who has my data and where?
Oh, of course. I mean, that this could be a discussion in and amongst itself, as you know, being a technologist. But yeah, there's always a concern who's accessing the data. When you're specifically dealing with children, what PII is going in there, what's accessible, and what's being stored cross platforms, and where is it being stored, and who has access to that. There's a lot of data privacy concerns, particularly around the districts in the K-12 and higher ed markets, because you're dealing with kids and their data and their parents' data and the school data and grades. And I could go on and on about this one, but yes, the simple answer is it's a big concern, and it should be a big concern because there's a lot of responsibility. So as districts choose their vendors and the technology they need, that should be part of the concern and part of the conversation is, okay, who has my data? What are you doing with it? If I compile it with this data, what does that look like? And what are the potential risks of doing that?
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note schools should expect good answers. Like in the past, it was, okay, maybe I think we're in the cloud. Like, is that good enough? And it's not good enough anymore. There's a lot of people in the cloud. I think that expecting good, solid answers around what really are you doing to treat my data with respect and with care that is deserved.
No question. No question. They should be asking those questions, and they should be getting the answers they need. I always had interesting conversations even today, especially on the communication side, in the safety and security. What are you doing? Where's it going? How are you managing it? And those are the questions that should be asked, and we were always ready with an answer. And any vendor that goes, not quite sure about that. No, I'm not specifically talking about a salesperson. They may not know, but a technologist on their team should know what are the security measures being taken to protect the district and the students and the teachers' data.
Makes sense. I liked you had said one thing a little bit earlier around ease of use and thinking about things simply. As like somebody we're looking to roll technology out, how does that play into that ease of use if it's a vendor versus multiple vendors, or what kind of experience should they be thinking about as, hey, I'm not just buying the best software, but is it being rolled out correctly?
Yeah, I mean, the ease of use is all about the client and the customer, right? It's not about the technology and how cool it is or what it can do. There's an aspect of what it can do. Obviously, there's a value behind that. But in terms of what you're asking, the question should always be asked internally of any technology company. Is this what's best for the customer? How does this make the customer use and experience easy, simple, and make them want to come back and continue using your product or product suites? And so then when you take it a layer of integration further, do you keep that simplicity? And is the back end still simple enough to get that data out, extract it, compile it the way you need to, analyze it, and then make the changes that you need to? And then also, a good technology company will stay in that loop. So they're constantly understanding the changing needs of the client and the market. And keep it simple. It's always keep it simple, right?
Yep. You mentioned it before, just the idea that there's a million things going on at any given time in the day, and different people that sit in different positions or filling in for things. So it's got to be easy to use. It's got to be easy to somebody can grab, sit down, whether it's engaging enough to just figure it out quickly, or at least a path towards how can they understand how to use it, and kind of to the point of everything being together. Once you start creating more consistent experiences, it makes it easier for users. They're used to using certain technology and certain things in certain places. One app or whatever that looks like should be able to do a lot of things for them, so they're not trying to jump between stuff, creating a disparaged experience.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Think about a daily use case of every consumer on their smartphone. When you have to start jumping around for productivity, not entertainment, but productivity, it's frustrating. And it's the same use in a B2B setting. We'll just leave it that broad, that the end user should have a one or two click experience to get what they need, not follow this tree to this tree and know this code to that code. It's just not realistic. And people will not continue down that road. They won't have a successful implementation. They won't have a good customer experience, and they'll leave.
Yeah, I've seen that trend even in apps. I think early on as apps became popular, there's an app for that, and there was a million apps, and each app did like one thing, and it was kind of you had to jump between so many different apps. There were so many apps on everybody's screens, and nowadays I've noticed there's people are trying to strategically say, hey, this can do this and this, and there's connections between that.
That's right, exactly.
Kind of as maybe jump into kind of this next topic around, as we talk about technology and apps and those types of things, thinking about how are we thinking about future ready technology, and people use the words like cloud or built from the ground up. I, as an engineer, software engineer, get excited. I could sit and geek out about all sorts of tech talk with Kubernetes and Dockers and all the things we get to use in terms of cool tech. But why? Like, why should the district care about future-ready technology?
Well, it's an interesting question and an interesting year. This is actually the perfect year to actually have that discussion about future ready. I mean, look at the back to school right now and the distance learning that is, and I say attempted to take place because you're plugging in all sorts of security aspects and Zoom links or Google Hangouts, Microsoft Teams, whatever they're trying to cobble together. And it literally is a cobble together to get distance learning. So if you kind of take that up process and run it across any technology, future ready means anything can happen and we can adjust to make sure that our technology is utilized. And it's very, being in your position, you kind of have to think like that a little bit anyways, Matt, but it's very difficult for anybody to say, hey, I know what's going to happen this year. However, let's have the flexibility built into our platform, to adjust as needed, whatever that may be. And, 2020 has been an interesting, trying year on a lot of fronts. Here where I live, we've got hurricanes. In California, you've got fires. We've got COVID. There were, go on and on and on. And district administrators had to adjust for end of school year, summer school, back to school, and it continues. It hasn't ended. So what are they choosing? They're not out there buying all the technology that they used to buy. They're narrowing down on what are the flexible, future-ready products that I need to educate these children. And I've seen it dramatically across the board. They've really narrowed down on the products that help them in this environment. And they're going to continue to do that because that's not going to stop. It's always going to be something different.
Yeah, I mean, COVID hit and happened fast, and so it was whose position, what kind of platforms and stuff are ready to handle what's next. There'll be something in 2021, there'll be something in 2022. As to your point, events happen, things happen. You'd want kind of software to be there and can be adaptive and nimble to keep up with that technology, keep up with the changes that are happening from beyond even outside. What technology changes from apps to phones to Windows to Macs to browser versions, all the things that, the technology needs to be able to accommodate because people are using devices like crazy. All sorts of devices are coming to play.
That's right. And this year more than ever, administrators are asking those questions. Who do you integrate with? Which ties back into the last point and into this point. Are you ready to Are you future ready? Are you integrated with the other products? Are you adaptable to whatever is being thrown at us as administrators? And yeah, it does run the gamut from phones to computers to all sorts of mobile devices. Let's just put it that way. And you have to be ready across those platforms.
That makes sense. I know as I've had to think, we try to think so keywords like microservices and things that are out there that allow engineering from a product standpoint to say, okay, how can I use the best scalable resources? That's that Kubernetes thing. How can I create things that can grow as problems occur, as more districts come on board? And as we think microservices, it's just an idea of taking something big and making it small. And as things get small, they become really easy to scale. They get easy to maintain. They're also easy to adapt. So you can connect to a lot more things. So as districts are thinking about that kind of stuff, those are some key things that might help as you're looking for some other terminology.
Absolutely. And it's easy. It's very easy, especially in a situation like COVID, for administrators to step back and go, what do I need now? And forget about what they might need, in the next trimester, right, as things change. And it does take a minute to take a look back and look across your portfolio and say, okay, I do need this now, but this particular product or this particular service or this particular technology is also going to help us because we know where this is going too. And that's been a real challenge, I think, this year, but we work with a lot of administrators at Remind, and we see that. We see they're asking us more than ever, who else do you integrate with? And will you handle this, next semester? Because this is where things are going. We get that question all the time.
Kind of to that a little bit. So, we've talked a lot about technology and how technology can play a role, and that we need to make sure that the right technology is there as an infrastructure. But from less engineering side and more as I think product or product management side, people talk about roadmaps and, that, so from your perspective, what's a roadmap? Why does it matter? Why does it matter to a customer that a company has a roadmap?
It shows a couple of things, particularly being in sales. It's a very useful tool for sales reps to go and not only show what we have and the value that has been created by a company, but also the things that we're working on to show them, going back to point number 2, that we are future ready, that we are building tools that are in line with what the customers are asking. Again, going back to making sure that you close that cycle. Your product development should be driven partially, or mostly, I should say, from your client's needs, and then partially by the innovation that you're able to put behind it. That combination is pretty powerful. And so being able to, and again, close that loop and then give them kind of a snapshot vision into what's coming and the angle that you're giving them, that's the power of a roadmap. Hey, you're asking for this, we can deliver this, but did you also know that it can do these things as well? And it's just a constant creation of value that the customer's paying for. Right, you're always improving on the platform, or you should always be improving. Let's say it that way.
Sure.
You should always be improving on the platform or the service that you're delivering to your clients.
Yeah, and it's important to challenge a vendor as to, are they future thinking? Like, are you thinking what's next and down the road? Because if you're focused so much on the now, you can react, but you might miss these long-term opportunities of how, gosh, if you could tie this and this and this together, you could not just create an interesting product, you can create a really interesting solution that can meet a lot more needs than any one thing together.
Yeah, absolutely. And we get that quite a bit in sales meetings where, have you thought of? I love that question. Have you thought of, okay, where is this going? Like, or have you heard of? And those kind of questions really, if you're listening, can pinpoint really what the customer is thinking and what their needs are and why, and then you can kind of dig in. Why would you want that? What does that provide for you? And then you get the value feedback that you can bring back to your team and your product team and say, hey, have we been thinking about this? And here's why.
Yeah, those are as an engineer, those are the conversations that scare me to death when somebody says that, because, oh no, now what? What are we going to have to build? But as a product person, being able to get into what problem can we solve? I mean, that is like, wow, gosh, I didn't think about it that way, or didn't realize our flip chart module was actually a customer request. Hey, we have a problem with this. How can you help us with this problem? It's like, oh gosh, that's a really interesting thing. I think we can actually help here. Technology makes a strong case for it.
That's right. And if you're not in the entertainment space, you should be in the creating value for others, which is, exactly what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Now, kind of on that technology roadmap, and as we think through technologies that come up, there's some that get, I'm going to call edgy or scary, but like, gee, should we be even thinking about this? Should people be apprehensive? Things like facial recognition. There's a lot of debate about, is this a direction we should go? Should we do anything like this in a school? What's your take on some of these, like facial recognition or any other edgy type things? Should we be thinking about it? Should we consider it?
It's a funny question, because I kind of look at edgy as all in the eye of the beholder, right? And so when you talk about things like facial recognition, if you have an iPhone and Android, anything that's already doing that, you're already exposed to that, and you're probably not even thinking about it. Unlock my phone, unlock my iPhone, I'm looking at it. That's facial recognition. What are they doing with that information? That's the key question. Is when you take that edgy technology and take it a layer deeper. What's it doing in there? Because those edgy technologies are going to change a lot of the universe, so to speak, if they do things correctly and what the customers want. You specifically called out the facial recognition. That one doesn't scare me because it's everywhere anyways. And this is, every time you walk into a building and you're captured on camera, most likely they're using facial recognition to identify you anyways, and you don't even know it. And then you get into interesting things like chip tracking or GPS monitoring. Happens all the time. People they're not even aware of it. And then if they heard about it, they might, freak out because it's edgy. But it's happening all around us. And really, if I take that thought process and I apply that from everyday life and where you know, out and about, and bring that into a school, I think there's a level that makes sense within that environment to create an environment for learning. And also, you know, there's pattern recognition and things like that that can make people more efficient within those technologies. So it's a bit of a loaded question because edgy is, you know, to someone might be really scary, and to someone else it might be, hey, this is the wave of the future. But I think ignoring it or not understanding what it could do is where the mistake could take place. And again, you know, future ready, knowing what's out there, knowing what is edgy and why it's edgy. Why is it edgy? What is it that scares you about it? We'll dig in there, right? And then you'll get your answers.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And, you know, as the schools are trying to think about why do we consider it? Like, what is the good and bad? Maybe to your point, some people thought it was edgy. Some people are like, I didn't think there was any edge here at all. Like, if we do it daily, what's the issue? You know, one thought would be, as you think about vendors and think about people in this industry, is looking for somebody that can help you on that process, whether you're a school district starting off with a pen and paper to get things in, or if you're already doing some advanced things, you know, there's a path, and you should look to a vendor that can help you create that path. Again, to that play on the roadmap, hey, we can help you where you're at today. And then we can help you as you're comfortable get to those next steps. And we can give you information on, okay, there is some concerns in your state around XYZ or the storage of XYZ. And as a vendor, here's how we can help you with that. And looking to them to be that, you know, that helpful expert. As you know, I know for us, we've done this with drill logs and safety plans, is try to be the expert in those spaces so that we can help people. And schools should look for vendors that are going to help them on that path. To your point, not to avoid it, but let's talk about it. Let's look at it and see how it applies. Where's the benefit? How can this really help us as a school district be more effective?
Yep, exactly. That's exactly the approach I recommend. Take a look at it. Ask around, talk to other people. Someone might have implemented it already. How did that go? And we know schools and districts talk to each other, right? They meet at, well, maybe not these days, but I'm starting to see more virtual, but they get together and they discuss what's going on in the districts surrounding them. So ask.
Yeah, no, I love that point. That you know, within that community is strong with schools. There's always school districts that, hey, I always ask them, or I always talk to them, you know, share those experiences, share those understandings and what technology has worked. I know that's been really important as COVID has happened. Hey, how do you deal with, you know, cars coming in and lines and students, and just giving a chance to brainstorm with peers. Use that as it pertains to all things technology, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So as we think about like apps and even staff using apps, is that, you know, is there considerations there? Should we be worried about having staff use technology, you know, on their phone as it relates to something safety, security?
Yeah, I think that anytime you use technology, there's always a concern with what the data is that's coming in and out. What you know, are they exposing information out, or are they taking information in that they shouldn't be? I don't think necessarily the fear is of the app. I think going back to your question around safety and security is more like, what are they doing? One, is it there to enhance the environment? And I know I keep coming back to environment, but I think it's really important in the schools to have the right environment for kids to learn. Is it enhancing that? Is it part of whatever that curriculum is? Or is it something that they should be doing on their free time on their own device in the privacy of their own home? You know, like TikTok, let's use that, right? It's a hugely popular app. Does that belong in the schools? You could debate both ways on that, right? And that's really up for the school and the district to decide. But there are technologies out there that say, hey, if you're on our Wi-Fi, if you're in our building, this is what you can and you can't access. And so it gives that layer of security. It gives that layer of safety, that the data that is coming in and out is the data that's supposed to be coming in and out. Again, I don't put it on the apps. I put it on the what is it doing and should we be using it question.
Yeah, and that goes to a bit on transparency to make sure the vendors are transparent about what it is and what this isn't, and the culture of the school. Make sure there's strong communication as they look to move these things out and say, hey, here's technology. That's great, but how can we stay ahead of introducing that technology to people that might be apprehensive? Like why? Answering those whys for them, and this is what it's going to accomplish, and here's transparency around what it is and what it isn't.
Yes, yes, and especially when you get into the areas of safety and security, not necessarily from technology, but from a campus standpoint. Why are you doing this? What are you doing this for? What are you doing with that data? Why are you collecting this? And communication is the backbone to all of that, to understanding what it is that you're trying to accomplish by putting any technology in, never mind all of them, and hopefully an integrated future-ready state.
Sure. As we kind of pivot off, and we're talking a little bit about creating an open environment as it relates to technology, as it relates to staff, but as we think about just the community in general, how visitor management plays a role in community. Is visitor management just about keeping people out, or how do you look at visitor management nowadays?
No, it's not just about keeping people out. And I think that's a bit of maybe a misconception in the market, is that this is designed to keep people out. The way that I would phrase that is it's designed to keep people out who do not belong. And so it's really about the community. And it's about creating an environment that is safe for kids to learn and teachers to teach and administrators to administer. And so when you think about it in those terms, we ran into all sorts of what I'd say is potential gotchas and concerns that, this is keeping out people who belong here. What about, let's use some examples, undocumented parents? That's a big one. No, we're not trying to keep them out. We're trying to identify who is in. And the people that don't belong, we will identify them as well, because don't you want a safe environment for your kids? There is at first it felt like almost selling like an insurance policy, like you want to keep people out. And then it kind of dawned on me, no, this isn't the approach we want to take. It's not about keeping people out. It's about keeping the environment safe and a learning environment where the teachers feel confident that they are safe and can teach those kids and the kids can learn. Probably the most common thing that we saw in terms of alerts when I was at Raptor was the ability to flag a parent who wasn't supposed to have access to the child. Mm-hmm. Right. And so when you talk about the people that don't belong, that's actually like a really, really valid point on the visitor management system, that it's not about the big scary person that you have in your mind that it's keeping out. It's about the parent who's not supposed to be there. Right. But everyone who's supposed to be there should be there and should be welcome there. And they should feel welcome there, not as a deterrent. The deterrent is for the people that it should deter.
Sure. Yeah, so that the whole idea of community, I try to think of it as a community management system. It should be, like you said, exactly, bringing the right people in, and inadvertently keeping the wrong people out, but really wanting to welcome. Now, again, COVID's going to play, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but COVID has a play in that today. But this isn't likely to linger forever. At some point, we're going to want those volunteers back in. We're going to want people coming in, and we're going to create an environment where those volunteers feel empowered and welcome to be there. I would have to think it's really important for a school district to welcome and try to wrap their arms around community. There's so much benefit to having that community engagement.
Yeah, exactly. And school is about community. It's a piece of the community that enables a lot of the community, and it does bring people together. And having security measures in place shouldn't mean stay out, right? This isn't a home security system where you really don't want anybody but your family in there, right? This is a community where you want the people that belong in the community to participate, engage, volunteer, be part of the PTO, come have lunch with their child, whatever that may be. I mean, that list is a mile long. But you should also be aware of who's in there. What if, then let's go to the what if scenarios. There could be an emergency. There could be a gas leak. There could be a fire. You do want to know who's in that building. Mm-hmm. You are accountable for everyone that steps foot through those doors. And so there is also the sense of protection in knowing, hey, we've got to evacuate. We've got to lock down. We've got whatever your scenario, who do we have to account for and where are they? And that's also a big part of systems like visitor management and door security and things like that, where holding the door open for another faculty member and they don't sign in. Well, do we know that they're there, right? We don't use, maybe some do, but for the majority, we're not using clock-in systems anymore, right? Again, some do, but as technology changes, you've also got to be aware of the benefits you're getting from it as well, not just the deterrence in the community.
Sure. No, that makes sense. And as we touched on it before in reference to staff, but ease of use and making sure, the experience is, or whatever we want to define the experience, that experience is easy for your community to use, whether it's through an app or pre-registration, especially given the heightened sensitivity in COVID. If the doors were to open to community, making sure that there's simple, clean ways, but it's welcoming. It doesn't feel like I'm trying to get into the airport or trying to go through a security check, and it should feel like, wow, I'm welcome here and they want me to be a part of it. But there's a process here, and process is good. I think that helps a ton for people to know that there is a process kind of thing, that's okay.
Yeah, and again, a process if built right around the right technology, well, therein lies the trick, right? How do you create something that's flexible, future ready, and your community is going to welcome it and embrace it and utilize it for all the purposes that it's built for, right? That's the key to pulling that all together, specifically in the school environment.
Sure. To that, how should schools think about if they were going to introduce a visitor management solution? Like, how could they do so to not? You want to prevent any concern or outlash from the community. Why are you making me to do this? Is there things they should think about if they're looking to put a visitor management system in place?
Yeah, I mean, off the bat, why are you doing it? Do you have a policy? What does that policy mean? What is it there for? And then communicate that policy out. These are the reasons we're doing it. This is what we're trying to accomplish. Let your community know that these are the changes you made, not the day you do it, because then you're going to have chaos. And I have seen that before. but again, going back to your point of communication, it's really key that you communicate, you being a school or a district, to your community what you're doing and why you're making these changes. And then be sure that you explain the policy behind it and what that means and what they're doing with that information. Working with companies who can help you identify, hey, these are kind of the concerns, and these are the shell around your policies, and there's a lot of them out there. These are kind of the shell policies you should be considering, is kind of a key first step if they haven't gone down this road before.
Mm-hmm. So the one thing that the first thing that I would think about when I think visitor management is the badge, and how often the badge falls off if I'm wearing a suit jacket. But what is badge? Should schools, is badges the thing? Is that the end all be all? Is there, how should they think about badges and printing and identifying people as they're coming in? What's important there?
So when you think about the badge, it's a simple identification to everyone that this person has gone through our process. And so is the badge important? I don't think the actual physical badge is the important piece. It's the identification, whatever that may be, and that can be very broadly defined, that this person belongs here, that they've gone through this, that we've identified this person, that they're part of our community, that they're here for a reason. So when I go back and I think of when we would talk about, hey, do I really need to buy all these badges? The answers all revolved around why and the reason for the badge, not the specific sticky label that they put on their suit coat or their shirt or their jacket or whatever they were wearing. It was more to identify to everyone there, this person is here and they've gone through our process. And so that to me is more the key than it is, how that identification manifests itself.
Sure. And that's important as we talked before about schools having policies and things in place as they think about this stuff, to make sure that, one, they have the policy, but people understand the why is it there? Why do we have this policy? And what do I do if I see an individual walking through my hall that doesn't have a badge? Okay, well, our policy is to. So how do I engage that person? What are the steps to take to make sure we have this safe environment for all of the people that are in there?
Right. Exactly.
kind of as we wrap up topics and we'll jump into Q&A, any other things top of mind as you think visitor management or safety, security, or anything like that we can touch on before we jump into Q&A?
No, I already touched on it, Matt. I mean, from my perspective, it was a big thing to create safe environments for kids to learn. There's so much going on, not only out in the world, but in the school and in the classroom that teachers and administrators have to deal with on a daily basis, and students for that matter. And so, adding one layer that makes life simple, that makes life safe, that makes life additive to that safe environment is always a positive from my perspective. It's something that folks really should consider as part of their plan, because it, again, not only from keeping people out, but also identifying who's in case you do need to get them. It creates a safety layer in both ways.
Sure. So I'll position to some questions that have been put in. If anybody didn't have a chance to put in a question, there is a Q&A box off to the right side of WebEx. So feel free to throw questions in there, and we'll kind of bubble those up and respond to them. So kind of one of the first questions is, Navigate plan on releasing a product similar to Raptor for visitor management? So that one's on me as engineering, and I'll be careful as I talk of it. That is definitely something we're looking into. We're working on, okay, what does this look like, and how can we meet and exceed expectations? Everything that Navigate 360 has done so far has been very strategic in our approach, and all the things we talked about today, making sure that it's we think outside the box as we think about these types of things. So I would highly expect to see some news and information coming out about kind of what we're looking at as it pertains to visitor management. Another question, being future ready is cool, but how can an organization be nimble enough to quickly respond to changes? So there might be two contexts there, one from the district standpoint and two from a vendor standpoint.
Certainly, and I think there's a lot behind both those aspects. The first is, quick is relative, right? When you say respond quickly, in the case of dealing with children, quick has to happen really quickly. And so how do you do that? And sometimes it does come from a reactionary standpoint. And let me speak to the company side first. Having a platform that is flexible enough to adjust very quickly is a challenge for engineers. Software development takes time, right? So going back to the roadmap discussion, what are they working on? How quickly are they getting these things out the door? Is it taking them, 8 months, 9 months, 10 months to get something that shouldn't take very long out? It's a good question to ask your sales rep and your technology folks, right? How nimble is the company that you're working with? How can they adapt? Schools have a bit more of a challenge, right? Because they have kids on their campus. When an emergency happens, they have to act fast, right? So finding the balance between that speed and the speed at which a technology company can move, it's a challenge. It's a challenge for technology companies as well as the schools and districts. So it's a roundabout answer to say, that's a question you really have to, as you're working with your technology companies, ask them about nimbleness. Come out and say, how nimble are you? Oh, we're very nimble. Well, that doesn't help, right? Dig in. Again, what are you developing? Tell me a little bit about the things you're doing to be ready for other things that happen in this environment, specifically this K-12 environment.
Sure. And, it's okay to ask about even development processes. You should hear things like Agile or Scrum or certain processes that are put in place to ensure quality as software is delivered. And, I know not all district administrators are going to be savvy enough to ask all the questions. You can talk to your tech guys, and they may be able to even feed you some things. But, it's okay to ask, so how do you guys build software? What does that look like? What is that process? So that you can understand how quickly are they able to adapt to change. And some of those approaches create environments that is easy for a vendor to be able to pivot. And I would expect vendors to be focused on the customer. Like, what is that customer experience? And as we talked earlier, having that loop of communication as things are getting built, we should be getting feedback. There should be a good feedback loop and re-engaging that. We never build software perfect the first time. It's all about iterative development and making sure that we stay on top of what's needed for our customers. Another question here. Some people say, some schools would say that, well, I already know the people in my community. It's a really tight community. I don't really need a visitor management system to identify people. What would you say to those schools?
My initial personal reaction is actually pretty simple. My wife grew up in Southeast Texas in a community where everyone knows everyone. And we're there a couple times a month. I meet someone new every time I go. And nobody knows everybody. And nobody knows everybody in their community, unless it's maybe a community of a couple dozen people, but that's rare. The other side of the coin is not just about knowing anybody, but going back to, in the case of an event, who is there and who are you responsible for? They're on school property, and some event took place. Do you know who's there? Can you account for them? If an incident takes place and a lawsuit takes place, let's go like the furthest end of the spectrum. Can you prove we did all these steps to know who is in our building and to take care of them? Happens all the time. So it's not just about, I know everyone in my community, but what is going on in your school and district? You should know that, right? Everyone should know that's an administrator or responsible for that piece of it, administration.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I think to add to that too, I think as with COVID is a great example of, okay, I may be allowed in this school today. Tomorrow, I may have conditions that would not allow me in that school. And, having schools having consistent processes in place as they think about, hey, it's not just about keeping out the sex offenders or those types of people. There's other considerations even in play nowadays that, I may need to have a distinct process so that we're careful and we're controlled about who is allowed to come in as hopefully school doors start opening up to more of the community. We want to make sure schools should be thinking about those processes that are in place that go beyond just keeping people out, but controlling who's there, knowing who's there, and making sure the right people are there they need to be.
Well, think about custody issues, right? There's no more bigger use case of what you're talking about than custody issues, because even in a small community, not everyone knows who should and shouldn't be seeing children. There's no way to know that. And you know what? If they're doing the old school way, they're putting it in a file, and either someone's got to have the greatest memory that you've ever seen and never be sick and never miss a day of school in order to really enforce that. And that's just not realistic, right? We shouldn't be putting that burden on people.
Yeah, and also knowing the facts of that. My perception of what parent is versus another parent may be different than what the paper says in terms of what is allowed today and what is allowed tomorrow. That all can change rapidly. So it is important to have that process and at least some tools there to make sure, again, that there's a holistic safety around that building.
Yep.
Another question, what are some of the things on Navigate 360's roadmap? So as we talk about, roadmap, the importance of roadmap, what kind of stuff are we thinking about from Navigate 360? So some of the things that are top of mind for me right now is, we have an emergency management system, as I mentioned before, and that system has a lot of components. It's got student accountability and drills, safety plans, flip charts, binders, reunification tools, that kind of thing. But a lot of it was, as we looked at mobile was really focused around the staff. And we tried to build some tools and things that focused on the staff. But what we're seeing and hearing from administrators and a lot of our customers is, hey, I would love to have additional tools in there for an administration purpose. So we're actually looking at overhauling our entire mobile experience and looking to create a really strong, robust experience there that not just builds staff, but also administrators have tools there that they can use and kind of build out. We're always looking at our safety plan piece as top of mind as well. As schools think about COVID and that, we want to make sure our tools around safety plans stay current and up to date, that they're easy to use and easy to adapt, because schools need to kind of inject some new things as it happens and make sure that those stay current. So, we're looking at our safety plan engine and understanding, how can we continue to exceed expectations there. we're looking at our student accountability, our response system, and as we think through sending out alarms and alerts and communication, we're looking at how can we enhance that communication piece and make sure that that data stays consistent and clear, whether it's through adding pictures or video streaming, making sure there's strong communication tools, but also figuring out how that extends into our responder community. We want to make sure, to the point of community, we want to include all community, including our first responders, in those tools. So those are pieces that are also on our roadmap right now. As we think about behavioral threat assessment, that how can we identify students that are on a pathway towards violence? We're looking at how can we integrate more pieces there and other models. So we did an NTAC model, which is a Secret Service model around identifying students of concern. And then recently we added in CSTAG, which is, again, another model by Dewey Cornell that just helps a school walk through a process to understand if a student is on a pathway of concern, and what questions can we ask, and who do we ask those questions to? What types of teams do we put around? So we continue to reinforce our behavioral threat assessment product with these kind of models. And one of the next models we're looking at is even suicide awareness and prevention. So in a lot of BTA cases, something will come up where a student will, show violence not to others, but maybe to themselves. And how can we help a school right in that process walk through kind of a suicide awareness prevention process that helps them put a plan and walk through steps and document it, so that they know, how are we meeting the needs of our students from a health and safety standpoint. One thing that we've released recently is our health screener, again, to the COVID question and how does COVID play. We had launched a health screening tool that just helps schools at a very high level understand, okay, if I'm going to screen my staff, make sure they've gone through all those screening components. And then as we think through students coming in, is there some simple tools that we can put in place that allow parents to run through those screening tools through kind of an online experience, so that we can pull together data as quickly as possible. And then, as hinted, visitor management is definitely top of mind right now. As we think holistically about this process, we want to make sure that as schools are preparing to be safer inside their building, how are we putting other tools in place to make sure that we understand who's there when an alarm hits, and how can we be more engaging with the community and the community responses to things. And then from a curriculum e-learning standpoint, we're looking at how can we continue to provide additional curriculum opportunities. What was once our Alice product for active shooters has been, continues to be built upon it. And what else can we do in terms of other awareness and other curriculum that can help be on the forefront of, hey, if we can educate students, parents, staff around certain topics of digital civility and those types of things, can we help create a more positive community, a more positive environment? So not just providing tools, but also looking to provide education that can help come alongside a school. Scanning quick to make sure I didn't miss any other questions. I think that's all I have right now for questions. Dan, I appreciate the time that you spent with us. As always, I enjoy the conversation and getting to talk through kind of what you see and how you see it. I love your perspective on it, and you think well about a customer and what's important to them and what's important to schools and districts. So I appreciate your time here.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate you inviting me.
Stephen, I'll turn it back over to you as we kind of wrap up.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you very much, Matt, and thank you, Dan, as well, for letting us be a part of what was really an inspiring discussion, and just for your time and expertise as well. We appreciate it, and our audience especially. And with that, I would also like to thank our attendees for joining us today as well. For those who really enjoyed our presentation today, there are many more upcoming web seminars like this one that are provided by District Administration, which is the leader in editorial coverage of news, trends, and current issues in K through 12. DA is also, there are a wide range of readers. Subscribe for free to our magazine and stay up to date with us, through the digital edition, our newsletters, and web seminars like this one. Also, for those of you who would like to watch this web seminar again, or if for those of you who believe that the solutions really provided in this web seminar would be helpful to your colleagues, you will be pleased to know that an archive recording of this web seminar will be available at the URL, which you can see on your screen here. You can also expect to receive an email from our team later today, which will include a link to all the slides. And so with that, on behalf of District Administration, this is Stephen Blackburn. Thanks everyone and have a great school year. Thank you and take care.